Very good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Warm welcome again to today's keynote speaker Neelima Thota ji and uh, guest speakers. Uh, see, I am very glad to welcome Mr. Gill. He has joined from Will from USA. So hearty welcome to you. I have two announcements before we go for formal talk. One is announcement about induction of Murtaza Cherawala as 34th team member of Rotary Club of Pune Riverside. Congratulations and heartiest welcome Murtaza Cherawala ji for your joining the club.
Thank you.
Please put your
Thank
hands
you.
together
Thank
and
you.
give him very warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you,
Now,
sir. Thank you for
thank you.
having me.
Thank you. And thanks to Lieutenant Rohit Zirazani for taking all efforts to connect Murtaza ji. Uh, Second announcement is about annual fundraising golf tournament, which is scheduled for Friday, 5th March, tentatively. It may be, maybe on 5th and maybe little 1 week later, but it is going to happen. Team members are requested to support golf tournament by bringing sponsorship. Details have already been circulated by Lieutenant Aditya Mishra on last Friday. Lieutenant Kiran is there, who is co-chair of the golf tournament. So I will request Kiran to flash some light. Over to Kiran. Kiran.
Yeah, sorry. So we are actually still actively looking for sponsors and also monitoring the situation currently happening with the COVID situation in the city. We've managed, I think, to get the goodie bag sponsored, but we're still looking for our main sponsor. So till the time we do not get that confirmed, the dates will stay tentative.
Great.
So we're
Thank.
hoping for some support from the club.
Yeah. Thank you, Kiran.
All
Um,
right, sir. Thank
yeah,
you.
we are now. I will be inviting Lieutenant Prerna Gaikwad, Secretary, Rotary Club of Pune Riverside, for her secretarial announcement. Over to Kiran. Over to Prerna. Sorry.
Hi, very good morning to everyone again. We've taken the tournament date as 5th of March, that is a Friday. So, in view of the golf tournament, which is going to be held on the 5th, the meeting for 3rd March stands cancelled as of now. If there is any change, we will put it up in the groups for all of you. So, as of now, 3rd March, there's no meeting. Please let's all work towards the golf tournament, which is on 5th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prerna. Not making taking much time. We are very eager to listen Neelima ji. So very warm welcome to Neelima ji. Uh, I will request Dr. Ganesh Natarajan, who is Director Corporate and Youth Connect Rotary Club Pune Riverside, to kindly formally welcome and introduce Neelima Thota ji. Over to Ganesh ji.
Sure. Thank you, Colonel, and welcome again, Nilima. Just as a background, I mean, I know Nilima for a few months now because she is actually a member of the Social Venture Partners group in Hyderabad. And as you know, I was chair of Social Venture Partners India for 3 years. So since then, we've been talking, and she has an amazing background. And it is, I mean, I won't read out the biodata, you all have it in your mailbox. But essentially, she's been in philanthropy and global philanthropy for quite some time, and also worked as advisor to the government, both at the central level, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, as well as various other entities. Has been very actively involved with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, has been very actively involved with Dasra, which probably is one of the top 2 or 3 social enablers in this country. And, and I think beyond that, she's also been a senior advisor and a director at Arghyam Foundation, and worked with USAID and a few others, which I will not mention. But more important, I think Nilima has been an amazing source of inspiration to many of us. I'm glad that 2 of my colleagues from Pune City Connect, Ashik Rizvi and Priya Patil, are both on this call, because every time we interact with Nilima, I think she brings that freshness of ideas and the capability of scaling, which, as all of you know, is one of my passions in the social sector. And I think it'll be amazing to listen to Nilima today. And also wanted to mention that today is hopefully her last day where she is in South India, because tomorrow morning she's moving to Pune. So hopefully we will get a new member of the Rotary Club of Riverside very soon.
That's great. That's
Over to you,
great.
Nikhil.
Thank you so much, Ganesh, for all your great words. I don't know if I really deserve so much of a praise, but thank you so much. And good morning, everyone.
Very good
I
morning,
have
Neelima
just
ji.
posted, thank you, sir. I've just posted in the chat in terms of if anybody would like to hear anything in particular about philanthropy from a global perspective, or even the perspective in India. I would be happy to, tailor my talk to those expectations, because I don't want to ramble around for 1 hour or half an hour of my talk, just from my side or my perspective, right? So feel free to post it in the chat, and I will be happy to address those topics or aspects. Yeah, so continuing with what Ganesh said in terms of my role so far, I have worked extensively across US, Germany, Europe, and then back to India in 2008. And ever since then, initially, I worked closely with the government in designing the urban renewal mission, where we sought to bring in um, policies or schemes which would benefit the urban poor or the unserved, underserved, the marginalized communities, the vulnerable communities, with a special focus on women and children, from the objective of creating agency for them, right? How to make sure how are their demands represented in the overall planning and design of the several schemes that work towards development in the urban areas, and see how the basic services are equitably accessible by all communities in the society. So the idea is generally, in all the work that I have been involved in, right from the graduation. So I passed out of engineering in 2002, and ever since then, I've been working quite aggressively with UN agencies to begin with. I started my career with the Urban Development Authority in Visakhapatnam soon after I graduated from public health engineering. The first batch, I had taken public health engineering because I had a passion for environmental science, looking at how do we improve the public health scenario for the communities and see how society benefits from all of these concepts, right? Be the engineering or the development sciences. So I started working with the Urban Development Authority, again from the perspective of seeing that how are basic services in slums and all addressed. And interestingly enough, only in 2008, the government made a move through the sanitation policy to say that the basic services will be delinked from the land tenure, which meant that regardless of whether a section of the population has land holding or not, they were entitled to basic services as enshrined in the Constitution of India. And the government, the local government, is responsible and accountable for providing these services to the marginalized communities, which is delinked from the land tenure. But until then, the governments consciously stayed away from providing basic services to the poor and the slum areas and all, because they felt they were redundant investments from the perspective that these were like the transient populations, migrant in fact, and if you made some permanent investments in those areas, those would become redundant. So but that was a good paradigm shift in 2008 with the policy, the first in South and Southeast Asia to actually state, which was a commendable move by the government of India. But until then, the areas which were inhabited by the marginal communities were really underserved and unserved for most part. So having seen all of that from close quarters during our graduation time, I consciously made an effort to work with the United Nations Development Program. And that's how I started with a research program with them to see how all of these basic services, which is water, sanitation, were provided to these marginalized communities. And then the allied basic services like health, which happens to be a collateral impact of having access to safe water and sanitation. So I also engaged in the health sector. But what we saw was that, risk capital doesn't come from the government. That was an observation which was strongly established in all of these agencies like the United Nations Habitat and other agencies, where we saw that risk capital often doesn't come from government. And that also stems from the fact that it's all public money or public finances that the government engages with, and they're answerable. So if they were to take a huge risk, and if those don't work, then they're answerable to the public, and hence, they can't be like risk averse, right? So they tend to not engage in this risk capital. And that's where even, the philanthropic capital was being approached or being accessed to see, can we then sponsor or finance the risk interventions or innovative interventions through the philanthropic capital. And there was a very conscious move to then bring about these philanthropic capital, right? Aggregate all of this and see, can we create a shared vision between all of these philanthropic units? If you look at individuals or if you look at organizations that have been set up using the philanthropic capital, to look at a common vision or a shared vision and see how can we achieve impact at scale. So I've been consciously working on interventions with impact at scale as the end goal or objective. And that's where my engagement with the global philanthropy or philanthropy in India has been, I've laid out kind of a roadmap to engage with all of this. And you cannot really achieve scale if you're not working with government. So I've always kept my ties with the government, intact, and then seen what are the other layers of funding that can come in, which can actually help with the sustainability of those interventions. Because you can very well start an intervention, but you require a continued engagement with those by certain key stakeholders. And we make sure that there's ownership that comes in within these communities for who we are designing these interventions. And so we had to engage with all of these identified key stakeholders and make sure the investment keeps coming in. And it's always been a strategic endeavor to look at how do we then make sure that we get some stakeholders or philanthropists to engage in this, get excited about the idea first, right? Unless you have a serious interest in it, you are not really, taking up the cudgels to invest into it for a multi-year term. So we would create those public meetings, and we would create the interactions with the end users, the communities, because more often than not, philanthropists really like to see the faces of those whose lives they are impacting, right? Whether the investment from a philanthropist could be nominal amounts, or they could be huge amounts like Bill and Melinda Gates, or we have Warren Buffett who brings in the money into the trust, or you're looking at other foundations like Amazon is now into it. Then we have Steve Jobs Foundation coming into the picture. So all of them, they really like to see the faces of the lives who they are impacting, right? So one of the, I wouldn't say really innovative or something, but some intuitive mechanism was something that we needed to create, where we kind of facilitated these public meetings where the philanthropists would get a chance to meet with the communities, understand what their concerns were, what were the issues that were plaguing those habitations, and then see how those monies would really make the difference or move the needle or create the change in that society per se. And that's how we actually started aggregating these amounts and looking at what are the areas, if we invested in, would really work towards poverty elevation, right? So creating resilience was one of the important things that we had to work with. So, if you look, if you've been hearing to my talk so far, one thing is that we always have to look at impact at scale. We can't just do pilots. Then if we really have to create this impact at scale, we can't leave the government behind. So if you do not want to leave anyone behind in the development, you really need to have the government as your key partner. And then philanthropists, of course, everybody has their own areas of interest. But then there has to be some entity that needs to bring all of these philanthropists together, look at the shared visions where you can pool all of these finance, interest, objectives. Then you're really looking at the scale and for the impact. And moving forward, you have to create that linkages between the philanthropist, the investor, and then the investee, who's receiving the benefits from all of this. And if they can see those tangible results on the ground, the philanthropist or whoever is coming in with that monies for the development, they really would like to engage in a multi-year engagement, right? And that's one side of the story when we look at philanthropy. And then you have the monies coming from the developed countries, which are pooled in the terms of these development banks, which are like the Asian Development Banks, World Banks, and other agencies, the larger international financial institutions like the Islamic Development Bank, Africa Development Bank, which are more concentrated in few countries. World Bank is, of course, across the globe. And the Asian Development Banks primarily works in Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, which is funded by the government of Japan for most part. And then Asian Development Bank as well. There used to be majorly loan assistance programs, but with the work of certain individuals within the bank and outside of the bank, we were able to move them to look at grant programs where you're not providing loans, but you're providing grants again to address the risk and the innovation capital. And all of these monies have one end objective. In all of their indicators that they design to monitor and evaluate the success of the program, a large portion of it is to address the urban poor, right? The access of the basic services, water, sanitation, healthcare, education, livelihoods. All of these are the focus areas, and especially for the urban poor. And as a subset of this urban poor is the women. So the idea is that female-headed households in the slums or in the urban poor areas receive the benefits as well, and in a focused manner, so they're not left behind. Again, households which are headed by older generation, older adults, they receive the benefits as well. So there are several categories that are created. And if you're designing, say, for sanitation, are the needs of the children addressed? Are the needs of the older people addressed? Are the needs of the women addressed? So the idea for pooling all of this finances is not just to create development at large for an area, but to look at how is the society, how are we creating equity in society, right? And how are we equitably managing the access for everyone? And how are we creating resilience in the vulnerable communities? So, for example, if you see the pandemic and COVID, right? When COVID hit, millions of people were out of jobs. And then again, all of the development pretty much slipped back. So we failed to create resilience in the community. So quickly, we again gathered around the table and we started thinking about, this is where we have failed. We haven't created resilience in the community. So what needs to be done? So we create resilience. So people don't lose jobs. They're not out of jobs. And then they fail to receive access to safe water, safe sanitation. Education had become inequitable again. There was so much of an inequity in terms of access to education. Those who could afford laptops, those who could afford the online access to education were able to continue with access to it, but many were left without access to education. So the idea was then, how do we create this resilience? How do we create the ecosystems? How do we bring about the systems change? So we are able to create that equity and access to the basic services for the urban poor. So the journey actually, it's never that, we have a one size fits all solution, which is enabled with all of these monies, but it's a constant evolution, if you will say, right? There has to be evolvability, there has to be adaptiveness in what we are doing. And the philanthropic monies have been greatly ushering in this flexibility, and then, the fungibility in the funds as well. And also in terms of, making the communities more resilient. So that has been the endeavor in terms of looking at how do we best utilize these investments in the society. And of late, we've seen that the point that I have initially broached upon was the shared vision, right? Because poverty elevation itself is a task in it that's so huge, where interventions in one area, even if you create livelihoods for the poor, you can never really elevate poverty in those communities, right? Because even if their income is improved, it's marginally improved in the initial period. And if they do not have access to safe water, safe sanitation, the collateral expenses for them in terms of taking care of their healthcare, all of that marginal improvement in their income would just go in addressing those issues. So what we realized was that we cannot really look at development in silos. So how do we look at water? How do we look at access to sanitation? And when we talk about resilience, we found that education was the best means to create that resilience, where education, it's not just simply in terms of the degrees and all of that, but in terms of understanding what are their rights, what are their responsibilities, what are their duties, and how can they build that, improve the adaptiveness in themselves through certain awareness generation, through certain skilling programs, and so on and so forth. So basically, the philanthropy in the world has been evolving in a way to kind of gather together, convene, and pool all of these ideas, pool all of these resources, and see how can this great challenge that we all face in our society of creating equitable societies, a reality. And that requires a common purpose to be evolved, and that requires for all of us to work together. And even as I was talking about poverty elevation, what we have seen is that there are 5 dimensions, core dimensions, which influence the state of poverty in a society, which are pretty much water, sanitation, education. Then we have livelihoods and health, of course, right? Unless we work on all of these core dimensions simultaneously, and we make sure we improve the state of these 5 dimensions simultaneously for all of the communities, we cannot really sustainably and at scale elevate poverty. And so we've seen in India itself, we have the India Philanthropy Initiative, which brings together Azim Premji Foundation, which brings together Nilakini Philanthropies, which brings together Amit Chandra's initiatives. So all the large philanthropic houses in India have come together to look at what are these issues that can need to be addressed to elevate poverty, and how can we all work together, and how can we pool the resources to address these challenges. And of late, climate change has taken the attention of everyone to say that because of climate change, you are increasing the vulnerabilities of these communities. So how can we either work towards making, reducing the climate change impacts, or how do we work at the downstream side where the impact of climate change can be addressed in a manner that the marginalized communities can withstand or address those and do not get pushed back into the poverty state again. So, it's the awareness that's created in terms of this collective initiatives has taken on a life of its own. And the philanthropic actors are coming together to really make this move. So, whether be it India or outside of the India. So even Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who I work with very closely in South and Southeast Asia, in terms of shaping the investments, in terms of managing those investments, in terms of building institutions, both within government and outside of the government, which will then sustainably carry on this work and strengthen the sector to sustain all of these investments and bring about the returns of investments in terms of improving the lives and quality of the life for the people in the society, and in the process creating the livelihoods. And in this direction, I was actually mentioning it to the Lighthouse Communities Foundation team that there is a fund that's been created globally, which is called the Lives and Livelihoods Foundation, LLF, which is funded by the UK Department Fund for International Development, which is the DFID, which is funded by BMGF, which is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is funded by USAID. Then we have World Bank contributing into it. We have ADB contributing into it. And this LLF fund is provided to the developing countries to shape projects, schemes, which will help empower the urban poor in terms of being part of the service delivery itself. So they are able to design those, keeping in mind the needs of the poor and delivering the services in a manner that it addresses the demands and it also makes it sustainable. And looking at differential pricing for these services also based on the socioeconomic profile, based on the demographic profile of a particular community. So these are all the developments that have been happening across the world, where philanthropists are coming together, working closely with the governments, which wasn't the case in the past. Even when I was the director at Arghyam Foundation, which is run by the endowment provided by Rohini Nilekani, it took 10 years, almost a decade, for Arghyam to even understand where should Arghyam invest its funds, which will give the biggest bang for the buck. And while it focused only on water, safe water, and later it was realized that water in silo can't be worked, water and wastewater. We need to work in that. If you are to look at conservation and preservation of the water resources and look at recycled reuse of it, so you're closing the loop in that area, and it improves the lives of the people. So it took 10 years. And then to even identify which areas, like, do we work with the springs? Do we work with the groundwater? Do we work with the surface water? How do we create local sustenance programs? And then, to identify that, we need to create awareness. How do we create these campaigns? How do we build capacities of the local community? How do we make these programs more participatory? And there's a huge moment today, participatory groundwater management, that we have been able to create, established. And it's also been taken up by the government, and it's being scaled by the government across the country now with the aquifer mapping and so on. So these don't really happen overnight, even for an institution which had the backing of, very successful people like Nandan Nilekani, Rohini Nilekani. It took almost a decade for the organization to settle in its, objective goal statement, even while the vision was clear right from day one, and to gather the kind of teams that are required to drive this. And then the partnerships with Tata Trust was the key in achieving scale. Then the partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Orissa and other states was again the key to achieve scale, right? So any organization, even with the best intent, cannot really achieve the scale if it goes on its own, right? The idea can only go so far, but you need to gather more minds which think in all likelihood. And then you need to get more funds, because scale that we are looking at, right, the population. So even in our country today, even on this date, on an average, we have 30% poor population. Take any urban local body, at a minimum, you would see that 30% of the population is still, marginalized. It's still vulnerable. So we are looking at great big numbers here. So when the problem statement itself is so large, having the intent of few philanthropists doesn't work. And it doesn't matter whether the philanthropist is contributing a small amount or a large amount, because it all needs to come in collectively. So every single penny matters in this work. And we've been able to create that moment around the world, right? And one of the major roles that I play working closely with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is building these collaborations between people working in the sector. So there are huge networks that are created, like the water networks, fecal sludge management networks, which work towards addressing the issue of sanitation and management of the waste. So these networks are important. That's yet another thing that the philanthropic funding provides for. Convening these, the convening power of some of these philanthropists is amazing, which needs to be really leveraged and taken forward. And the consciousness that's been created in the society now, that every individual can be an impactful philanthropist or an impactful grantor, right? So, and create the difference, but we all need to come together. So that's one of the things that I've always worked in my career so far, which spans over 2 decades. Right from the word go, when I just set out to get into the professional career world, the idea was, how do we build these collaborations? How even in the government, there was so much of silos. So the Urban Development Authority wouldn't work with the municipal corporation. So that was a big achievement for us in Visakhapatnam to create that collaboration between the departments, so that the interdepartmental collaborations are very important. So collaboration is the key, has always been the key, is the key, and will remain the key for us to achieve this change in the society that we so often passionately engage with. One of the things is to identify the issues and how do we then, so I've set up a foundation which works in poverty elevation. And again, all these 5 core dimensions that I have talked about, we invest into those on the communities that we work with. And we look at our disaggregate unit of improvement as a household instead of just an individual, because then we can truly determine what is it that's required to make sure that the household is pulled out of poverty as a whole and sustainably. And how do we sustain that change that we have so brought about within that household? So, even while we have done that, we've been aggregating several innovators to provide the solutions that would address the issues that, challenge the development in that particular community. So, collaboration remains at the crux of all of this, whether I have worked with the philanthropist in Germany or in the US or in India. So, the philanthropy really is required to make this change in the society. But again, as I said, the shared vision needs to be created at every level as we move forward. And we need to bring in several collaborators to look at how do we address these challenges in the society. Yeah. So that's been my journey so far. And I would like to pause here and really check with the audience today in terms of whether there's been any kind of, they could make sense out of what I've rambled so far. If there's anything in specific that you would like me to, answer, address, or talk about. And thank you so much for the opportunity once again, Colonel Mishra and Ganesh. So I would open the floor to the audience now for any questions.
Thank you,
Neelima,
Neelima.
just one point I wanted you to touch upon. It'll be nice if, for instance, just to give you a context, In this group itself, you have a number of very, very long-term philanthropists. My friend Neeru Goyal is an amazing philanthropist, does a lot of work in schools, etc. Mukesh Malhotra, whose family runs the Wakefield Group. So they have a foundation doing great stuff. Uma is here, my wife, and of course, you know the amount of work we're doing in philanthropy. And like that, I mean, we have a lot of people who are doing a ton of stuff in our individual capacity. My question to you is very simple. I mean, in all your travels around the world, have you seen truly collaborative philanthropy happen? Now, asking you this because in SVP International at a board level, we are trying to get a lot of people to work together for Black Lives Matter in the US. And we're finding there's not too much of willingness to collaborate even in America. I mean, maybe at the large level it is. So any thoughts on that? I mean, in your own journey, have you seen excellent causes around which multiple people, philanthropists, etc., are willing to collaborate?
So, Ganesh, I think you hit the point here on collaboration. While it's really recognized that it's a key for us to achieve impact at scale, there are still challenges. And that's because every philanthropic institution, if you take, or if you take individual philanthropist, as I said, the interest areas differ. But if you are able to create the shared vision, for example, Tata Trust and Arghyam have worked on the same causes, water, sanitation. But it took them a long time to understand how can they even join forces to look at working together. How do we pool our resources to save? One is like the geographic areas, they differ, where they would like to work, where they would like to see the change. The other thing is the areas of work itself, right? And then the approaches to it. So it would be really important, like even for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to work with Rockefeller Foundation and so on and so forth. It's important to align in terms of what are the end objectives and what is the approach. How do we really get to that? What is the roadmap? And which geographic areas do we work in? Once an alignment is arrived at on these issues, I think the collaboration then falls into the place. But otherwise, as you said, it's really difficult to get different parties to come together and work on causes, like what really moves them. Climate change, for example, there's several sub areas in that. So it's just about identifying that communities where you want to bring about the change. And as I said, philanthropists get excited about seeing the faces, right, whose lives they are impacting. So aligning with the community where they would like to bring about the change, the areas, focus areas where they would like to see the change come in, and what is the approach. These are certain things that require alignment. And then, yes, we've been able to really bring about these collaborations and make them work. But yeah, it's a difficult task and it requires several rounds of discussions and bring about these alignments. So perseverance again. But it's not an impossible thing, Ganesh, while it's a little difficult path to endeavor on. But yes, we've been able to achieve that in the US, then in Bangladesh, where we are working. We've created like this FSM network where ADB, World Bank, ISDB, which is the Islamic Development Bank, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and UNICEF have come together, and they're pooling their funds to make these change happen in that country. And in India, of course, I have talked about Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Tata Trust, Arghyam Foundation, all coming together in Orissa and Maharashtra and other areas to make change happen. So, but there have been multi-year engagements also, right, to make kickstart this collaboration.
Great, thanks, Neelima. Other questions, folks? Anybody would like to?
Can I come in? This is Mukesh. Is there any organization which can kind of do a bit of matchmaking for collaborations where we could put in what our goals are, and if there are other organizations which have the same goals or same sort of endpoints that they want to achieve, we could then get into touch with each other and collaborate? Because as you said, finding the right finding a sort of a parallel in your, some sort of alignment in your goals is most important if you're going to get into any collaborative setup. Is there any such agency that could help?
Of course. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name here.
I'm Mukesh.
Yeah. Yes, Mukesh, good morning. So there are several organizations in India who've been doing this kind of work. For example, Dasra that Ganesh mentioned earlier. They work with several philanthropists and then they try to do this kind of a matchmaking, not just with philanthropists, but also with other organizations like the CSR actors. So they bring all of them together to align either on one cause, or they try to identify the NGOs and the philanthropists and try to bring them together and so on. So Dasra is one, Sampata is the other organization, which is also based in Bombay. And there's another organization, Satwa, which also does amazing work in terms of even conducting research to see how they can align these various philanthropic initiatives. So there's a long list of such organizations which tend to bring together and do this matchmaking in the philanthropy area. I'd be more than happy to share the list with you, Mukesh.
Thank you so much. I would really appreciate that. Ganesh, can you help me with this, please? Hello?
Which one, Tony?
Ganesh, she mentioned 3 or 4 organizations, Dasra, Fatwa, and all that. If I could get hold of them, I'd really appreciate that. If I can get the coordinates. Yeah.
Satwa, I know myself. Yeah, but the others also we can.
Please.
Anyway, Neelima is going to be here from this week onward.
Yeah.
Maybe we can catch up.
Great. Thanks so much. I will get it.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Neelima ji,
Thank you.
we have been working on education, for these people. So don't you think it would be right if we go ahead with the education part, then we can sort out a lot of these problems which are there and make a difference to the generations ahead for them.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I said we have been working on the education part of it, where we look at the education of both the girl or the boy child, and it makes a difference to the generations ahead.
Right.
So wouldn't that take care of everything else then?
No.
So Sanjay, while the education happens to be, it lays a great foundation for improving the intergenerational quality of life, so to speak, either for the family or for the individual. But there are several other areas, right? As I said, healthcare. Then the preventive healthcare, even if you begin with, or access to water, sanitation, and so on. So unless those are addressed for them, even if it improves their ability of employability or so on, it still remains, incomplete development for the community as such. But of course, with the education improvement of that, you're building their cognitive skills, you're building their awareness of all of this, the rights, responsibilities, duties, as I said. It would definitely improve the intergenerational quality, but if you're looking at a holistic development, then you also need to look and focus in the other areas simultaneously.
Thank you.
Neelima, I have a question. This is Uma here. So yeah, that was a great session and I really enjoyed listening to you. Neelima, I have a question on the livelihood opportunities that several NGOs and governments are trying to create through the SHGs for women in particular. I somehow find that ability of large percentage of women SHGs to forget about scaling, even to maintain sustainability becomes a question because of lack of capital or their ability to mobilize capital as required. So I'm wondering the cooperative form of bringing them together and enabling them sustainability and scaling Is that something that you're seeing philanthropists and other agencies that you have been associated with, whether they would be interested in fostering such kind of cooperative models, like we have seen very successful such models in India through Amul and others, whether that is something that you find there is an appetite for facilitating amongst select SHGs?
Absolutely, Uma. So most of these philanthropic initiatives like the Azim Premji or electronic philanthropists and all have been working to create that agency right at the ground level and create those cooperative moments as well. So as I talked about the groundwater management that has been greatly provided the impetus for by Arghyam Foundation, that's also like a participatory groundwater management, which is again strengthening the grassroots level organizations or community-based organizations, because it's a strong belief even in the philanthropists that unless you are empowering these grassroots level organizations or the communities, the sustainability remains a far distant dream, right? So there is definitely an appetite. And there is also a lot of funding that's available with these philanthropists that they would like to invest in strengthening that, because that also shows those tangible results for them where they can see the direct benefits reaching the real masses out there. So definitely.
Okay, thank you, Neelima.
Any
other questions?
Yeah, Ganesh, please go ahead.
No, I'm just asking the same question. I mean, any other questions anybody would like to know?
Yeah, Neelima, if I may.
Yeah, Ashik.
Sure.
Yeah, so Neelima, I know that you mentioned that scale and depth are important, and it takes a lot of time to get to that stage where everyone starts collaborating and performing. I just wanted to understand: is there any way that we can do this at a fast pace? Can we scale up at a fast pace and ensure at the same time that depth is not compromised? Can we do that?
So, Ashik, one of the things is that, the model, right? So there is a theory of change and then there's a theory of scaling, right? So once you have established the profoundness of the theory of change, and then you have understood what are the elements that kind of define the theory of scaling, then you're not losing out on the depth, even while you're trying to create the breadth of that expanse, right? So for us, it's very important to understand very clearly what is a theory of change. And once you have like nailed it, and then you have understood for scaling, so you don't lose out on the wholeness of that theory of change, what are certain things that are the pivotal elements, and then what are the things that need to change, right? Because not every element of theory of change will undergo a variation when you're trying to scale it out. So you need to understand which are those binding elements and which will have to be customized, contextualized as you scale. Then you're definitely not losing out on the depth. Because even with the foundations, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation investments, where we are trying to make sure that the scale is achieved, we tend to make sure that we have those NGOs and we have those organizations, we have those systemic changes, and we have created that ecosystem, which will then make sure that we are not losing out on the essence of that change while we are creating these collaborations across that breadth of the area. Say we are looking at out of the 330 municipalities in Bangladesh, we are trying to scale it to 200 municipalities. That's a gigantic task. But we make sure that these ecosystems are well established, local players are well capacitated, and then then the scale comes into the picture. So you really don't lose out on the depth, but you are arranging those ecosystems to be multiplied across the area of scale where that essence is not lost and you're also able to sustain the change. Does it answer the question, Ashik?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
We have time for one more question in case anybody has. Neeru, you're on mute.
Yeah, Neeru.
Yes, I want to ask one question. From our club side, Neelima ji, your talk was very nice, and scalability is one thing which everyone wants. But this collaboration with government, there is a question in my mind. We started a project called Ladli, where we used to educate children, these girls, and then we used to distribute the napkins, free napkins from our club side. But to take away these napkins, I connected with the PMC that they should pick up those napkins once a month from those schools where we are distributing free napkins, and their van comes and they take those napkins to their city this incinerators. But I went there at least 40 times. I mean, the head of PMC, they were all for it. They wanted to collaborate. But down the line, I did not get any help. And later, I just left it. I mean, what to do at this when this type of situation arises?
Hello.
Yeah, Neelima ji, please go ahead.
No, I was just asking Neeruji, when she said down the line she did not receive the support, who are those stakeholders that she's referring to?
Corporation, Pune Municipal
Stakeholders,
Corporation.
we wanted to collaborate with the government. I mean, I approached PMC, and I went there at least 40 times.
Okay.
But nothing. I mean, they came for 3-4 months, but not after that. They used to come to the school after so many reminders, but then the energy, I mean, which is wasted in follow up, is too much.
True. So Neeruji, when we build the collaborations with the government, one thing. Hello.
Yeah. Please.
Yes.
Yeah. Is this audible? Am I audible?
Please.
Yeah.
Okay. So Neeruji, I was saying that when we always build the collaborations with the government, we tend to make it both a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. In the sense, we come with the highest authority in that particular area. So we first start with the district collector, and then we try to understand what are their goals that they need to achieve in that calendar year or in that fiscal year, right? And once we align it with what they need to achieve in order for their administrative goals to be attained, then it becomes easier to plug in our initiatives to align with that. And when the message comes from the district collector to the municipal corporation or so on, then it's taken more seriously, right? So we try to ensure there's an official communication that's kind of trickle down to these other agencies that you really want to work with. Say, for example, अगर आपको municipal corporation के साथ ही काम करना है, then we try to get the formal communication from the district collector to the municipal corporation. And that is then incorporated into their yearly targets or the goals. And then they are kind of measured by the district collector's office. So then it becomes easy. Tabhi, regardless of whether personally they're interested or not, because it becomes an administrative target, they have to work towards it. So we try to bring in certain carrot and stick models as well.
Yeah, that is what I also tried to the best of my capacity. I approached the top person of PMC, and I tried to get a meeting, occasional meetings with the downside people also at my house, calling them, encouraging them. I did everything. I mean, and the top person was so passionately in love with this Ladli project of ours.
Right.
But what to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Neeruji, one small suggestion.
My word says everything.
Yeah, thank you. In fact,
Neeruji, there's a lady called Priya Patil on this call. So Priya has more access to education in PMC than anybody you know. I'll request Priya to contact you separately and see whether we can help on the Ladli project. No problem.
Definitely, Neeru.
Thank
So
you.
do
Thank
get
you.
in touch anytime. I'd be glad to be of help.
Thank you,
Okay,
Ganeshji. Thank you, Ganeshji. Thank you, Neelima ji. Thank you, everyone. In fact, we are running out of time, and we have guest Bill, Priya, Asit, Dr. Uma Ganesh, and one student. He is called joins Soham. So warm welcome to join today in the morning this session. Bill is from the team international partner of Global Grant Project. He is our Rotary Partner Project for Global Grant. Bill, would you like to speak something?
Well, just that the grant has been, we're in the final stages of it. You have the form to get online to fill out. And looks like we've got everything we wanted to get. And we'll have a 40-bed health center set up for helping people that are dependent upon oxycodone and that stuff to recuperate and to become an asset to the community. Couldn't do it without your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Lieutenant Rohit Jirazani would like to speak, announce something. Over to Rohit. Rohit, are you there?
Rohit always has an audio problem.
Anyway, we will take up. We will take up if he comes later. So, going for formal vote of thanks, I would like to invite Rotarian Milind Patil. Over to Milindji.
We thank you, madam, for taking time off to address our club. What I've really been inspired from your talk is the holistic view that needs to be taken while addressing some of these problems, especially when you mentioned about groundwater, drinking water, fecal waste contamination, all being taken into focus while trying to solve problems. In your talk, you also pinpointed the need for philanthropic capital and also at the same time ensuring the ownership from the beneficiaries. Young persons like you, Neelima, are achieving so much. We are assured of a bright future for our country. We wish you the best in your career and hope to see you impacting public life in future in a way, a very big way. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you very much, Milind bhai. This thought of the week is the healthy tradition of Rotary Club Pune Riverside. So I would like to invite Rotarian Prerna Gaikwad, Secretary, to do this honor. Over to Prerna.
Thank you so much, Colonel. Just taking away from what Neelima has spoken today, I'd just like to say giving is not just about making a donation. It is about making a difference. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. Similarly, this cracking a joke, which is tonic for the day, is also a healthy tradition of Rotary Club Pune Riverside. For doing this honor, I would like to invite Rotarian Sandeep Bash. Over to Sandeep ji.
Thank you, Kanna sir. Good morning, everybody. I was listening to the talk about being a philanthropics and giving. So there were these two friends, and very good friends, and one of them came to a stage that he was about to leave this world. So he tells his other friend that when I go, please sell all my assets and put that money in my grave, because I know when I'm gone, people are going to misuse that, especially my children. He says, okay, fine. And with tears in his eyes, he says, if you let me handle all this, okay, I will equally match whatever you're going to leave behind. So the other friends of theirs, they say, do you even realize the kind of wealth this guy has who's going away? You will never be able to match that. He said, no, I'll manage somehow, don't worry. So after this guy is dead and gone, okay, this guy, the one who's promised that he will be matching whatever he leaves behind, he becomes even richer. People come to him and say, we thought that you were going to donate everything to that guy's grave. He says, yes, I did. Then how did you become so rich? He said, I calculated all the assets, sold them off, and doubled it. I put a check of that amount into his grave.
Great. Thank you, Sandeep bhai. Rohit, are you there? You wanted to announce something? Over to Rohit.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Network problem is there, Rohit.
Am I audible?
Yeah. Please go ahead. Rohit, please go ahead.
Well,
Rohit, you are not.
No, it won't work.
You are not audible, Rohit. Anyway, we will circulate on the group. Okay. So, thank you very much, Neelima ji, for being with us. We feel blessed to have you, and good news that you are moving to Pune. So we will be connecting more with you and getting a lot of experience and help whichsoever is required for our Roti Club Pune Riverside as far as philanthropy is concerned. So not taking much time because already we have overshooted. So please allow me to, if anybody do not have any question or anything, so allow me to adjourn the meeting. Should I adjourn the meeting, Neelima ji?
Sure, sir. Thank you so much for
Neelima.
having me, and thank you, Milind ji, for your kind words. Thank you, everyone, for your precious time.
Thank you very much. Stay healthy, happy, safe, and blessed.
Thank
See you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.